Hey guys, DREAGEN here. Just want to give you a quick little update and or correction for this episode of the KAIJU Cataclysm. At one point I'm going to be discussing the potential of Godzilla vs. Kong being pushed back and possibly having some reshoots. Now, during the recording of this episode, a little bit of a news update was released saying that Warner Brothers will in fact not be changing their release date, nor will they be doing reshoots for the film. Now, this by no means affects this video as a whole. It was one tiny section that I was discussing, and the rest of the video is still relevant. It's just, at the time of the recording, that bit of news had not come to light. So when you get to that part of the video, just know that Warner Brothers has, at least at this point, who knows, they could change their mind, but they are, right now, as far as we know, not changing the release date and not doing any reshoots for Godzilla vs. Kong. So with that out of the way, please enjoy the rest of the video. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the KAIJU Cataclysm. Today I wanted to do a shorter video and kind of just talk about, a bit more of a, kind of another industry video, but this one related more towards kind of specifically what's going on in the Godzilla franchise right now, more specifically the Monsterverse. And before I start this, I want to say this is not me speaking with any kind of certainty. I don't have any kind of inside track. No one official is, blowing up my phone and calling me, giving me information, nor is this going to be like a gossip kind of episode where I'm like, ooh, did you hear what such and such said? That's not what this is about. This is more or less just kind of outside observation with a little bit of speculation thrown in, and kind of more or less just kind of a general discussion of what we can infer based on what we're hearing, what we're reading, what we're seeing. And basically the focus of this video I want to talk about is a little bit kind of differentiating now between Legendary and Warner Brothers. Now, Legendary is essentially the production company that has licensed the rights of Godzilla from his parent company, Toho, and essentially partner with a larger distribution production company, Warner Brothers. So basically Warner Brothers now puts up a good chunk of the change that produces film because they are the larger kind of corporate entity, and will be in charge of distributing the films. But it is essentially Legendary's creative project, with Warner Brothers just kind of giving them some financial muscle and, again, distribution. Now, recently, obviously, in the last video we talked about that, the Monsterverse, or rather the Godzilla King of the Monsters, was essentially underperforming at the box office, which, we already went into how kind of strange that is to say for a film that opened up #1 worldwide and was the #1 movie in the world, that we have to kind of talk about it now as if it opened up at number 3 or 4, because now there's so much money that goes into not just producing the film itself. We're not just talking about the production budget, but marketing and all kinds of business deals based on different international markets and this and that, that now films need to make, honestly, a ridiculous amount of money, and at times almost an unrealistic amount of money, to be considered a success. Again, once upon a time, a film that opened up #1 in the world would not have been considered a flop, or nor would anyone been questioning its, marketable viability in the future. But because we live in this day and age where there's so much money that goes into getting a film on screen, that a film that opens up #1 doesn't necessarily mean it's a success anymore. And that's kind of what we talked about in the last video. So Warner Brothers essentially came out and basically said they are probably going to be pushing back the release date for Godzilla vs. Kong and possibly doing some reshoots. Now, I don't really have any problems with them pushing the date back, because one of the issues a lot of people think that Godzilla King of the Monsters had was it just got put into a very busy time slot. I mean, the summer, big films used to only come out in the summertime, And basically January through April was just kind of like a no man's land of movies. And now you see big movies being kind of dropped throughout the entire year. But summer still is, you know, the boardwalk, if you will, in terms of the Monopoly set. It's still the more high-end real estate of the movie-going season. And by originally, I believe Godzilla King of the Monsters was supposed to come out. Might have been supposed to come out in March. I can't remember. I might be wrong. But it got moved to May. Now, on the one hand, I think that's great. It's a big summer blockbuster popcorn movie, and May is kind of the kickoff, if you will. Not really anymore. April's really more the kickoff, but May is still kind of the front end of the summer movie-going season. Makes sense, right? Well, the problem is the end of April, you had Avengers. Well, Avengers was going to be cleaning up at the box office for a good long while. After that, we had Detective Pikachu, which wasn't a big deal because A, it's a different kind of movie, it's going to have a different kind of market, and it was also Legendary producing it, so either way, Legendary was going to win out on that. After that, though, Disney was again coming out with another movie, this time Aladdin, one of their latest live-action adaptation, and while you can make the argument that it's two very different audiences, you know, it's a Disney movie, it's going to pack some weight. And then we had Godzilla King of the Monsters. Now, Godzilla King of the Monsters beat out Aladdin when it came out. It topped it, but a lot of people are wondering if, had it not been for Aladdin the week before, would the film have done even better? Would the film have grossed more? Because Aladdin was still kind of eating away at its box office. It was still kind of picking away at, you know, perhaps people who were going to go to the movies that weekend and were like, okay, what do you want to see? Well, you know, if Aladdin had come out a week earlier than that, or even earlier than that, you know, but well, you know, we've already seen Aladdin. You know, there's really nothing else. Let's go see Godzilla. It's got Millie Bobby Brown. It's a big summer popcorn movie. Why not? The problem is, a lot of times people go to see certain movies the second weekend because they don't want to deal with, you know, the opening, you know, crowd. So a lot of people hadn't maybe seen Aladdin yet. So they went and said, well, we haven't seen Aladdin yet, and that looks fun. Let's go see that instead. And not to mention, there are also just some people who are, if you put, you know, a live-action Disney movie versus a giant monster movie, they're going to pick the Disney movie because, again, we've already talked about that. You know, kaiju films are a niche market, so it's not going to appeal to everyone. And perhaps the best way to have it appeal to more people is if there's really nothing else around it. Like, it's more or less like, if you want to go to the movies, this is really the only thing that's out right now. The only kind of spectacle film that's out right now. The only really movie worth going out to the movies to see. So even if it's not normally your cup of tea, like, well, whatever, I feel like going out to the movies, if this movie's out, let's go see it. Whereas by having Aladdin so close, a lot of people were like, well, I don't know if we're going to see a giant monster, let's go see Aladdin instead. And people feel that that kind of maybe hurt Godzilla's box office a little bit. So Warner Brothers has come out and basically stated that they want to basically push back Godzilla vs. Kong and possibly do some research so they can give us an A+ movie. Those are their words. To which all the fans said, well, Godzilla King of the Monsters was an A+ movie. You gave us the movie we wanted. If, you know, if there was only one issue, it was the fact that you released it during a very busy part of the year, and unfortunately, because Godzilla doesn't have as much clout as Disney, basically, whether it be Disney proper or Marvel, you know, it was going to suffer. Whereas if you would have maybe put it out earlier in the year, maybe the spring, it might not be as high profile, but it would have done a lot better. I mean, a great example is if you look at Kong Skull Island. Kong Skull Island did better than Godzilla 2014, and it came out in the spring, where there was not a lot of competition around it. And ironically enough, it was tracking not to do as well as it ended up doing. It actually surprised people in terms of the industry because it did better than they thought. But if you look at it, when that film came out, it was really the only film of its like it, of that kind of caliber during that time of year. And now people kind of go to the movies whenever. It's no longer like there's the summer movie season, the holiday movie season, and then that's it. It's now people go January, February, March, you know, April to the movies. So by putting it during a time of year when there wasn't a lot of competition, the movie did very well. You know, even if people were just going to see it because there was nothing else to see, well, they were going to see it. Whereas Godzilla was kind of just smacked right in the middle. I mean, you had Aladdin the week before, and you had X-Men Dark Phoenix the year before, the week before, and X-Men Dark Phoenix the week after. Now, some people I know, Dark Phoenix wasn't tracking very well. Apparently got even lower Rotten Tomatoes scores than Godzilla, King of the Monsters did. But again, Rotten Tomatoes, I mean, don't even, it is the most superfluous thing to base your movie-going decision on. You might as well, you know, base going to the movies or not by what the clouds look like, then it makes about as much sense as Rotten Tomatoes. But and you can trust that opinion because it is not bought and or paid for. But I digress. But the point is, it was kind of wedged into two very large properties, and despite what people were saying about X-Men: Dark Phoenix, it's still part of a large Western superhero franchise that has been ongoing since the early 2000s. So it still had some legs on it, and it was essentially marking the end of kind of this non-Disney owned Fox era of X-Men movies. It was the end of an era, essentially. So people were going to go probably check it out just to kind of wrap it all up. And again, it's X-Men. Regardless of how it looks, regardless of what people are saying about it, critics are saying about it, it's X-Men. It's going to come with some weight behind it. And again, it is a Western franchise, so it's less niche, I hate to say it, than a Godzilla film, for instance. So it wasn't an issue that there's anything wrong with the film, because the Godzilla fans went and saw the film and really, really loved it. It was the issue of that it wasn't drawing in a large amount of the Western audience, or the general going audience, basically. So pushing it back maybe to August, a little end of the summer, less busy. A lot of the other big blockbusters are kind of out of the way. That's not a bad idea, and it's an idea that I actually don't have any qualms with. In fact, I wouldn't even mind them pushing it to something even like October, because you look at films like Venom, for instance, that got very poor reviews, and yet the film did very good. But aside from the Halloween film that came out, there really wasn't anything else coming out in October. So if people wanted to go see a kind of a tentpole film in the month of October, Venom was it, and Venom did very, very well for Sony. It cleaned up. Whereas if Venom had come out perhaps in the middle of the summer, based on what people were hearing reviews, I don't know if I want to go see it because everyone's ragging on it. Plus, there's all these other movies coming out. I'll wait for this one to come out on VOD. But because there was nothing else coming out and people want to go to the movies, there's nothing. I know people aren't saying great things about it, but I want to go to the movies, and how bad can it really be, right? And everyone went to the movies, and surprise, surprise, everyone liked it despite what the critics were saying. So the issue here, a lot of us fans have been saying, is that it wasn't an issue with the film's quality. They gave you a solid Godzilla film. Like, again, if I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but if you didn't like Godzilla King of the Monsters, I don't know. I don't know what you want for a Godzilla movie. I mean, Godzilla has been everything. He can be a dark political drama. He can be a superhero. He can be campy. He can be action adventure. Godzilla has been everything and anything under the sun, and that's why the franchise has persisted for 65 years. So you can have a political satire film like Shin Godzilla, or you can have a big action adventure film like Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's all Godzilla. It's all authentic. So if you didn't like it, there's no conversation to be had between the two of us. So what a lot of us are saying is okay, if you want to push it back, that's fine. No problem. It's probably for the best, because Godzilla vs. Kong might be our last chance to see the MonsterVerse continue. But in terms of reshoots, now Warner Brothers does have a bit of a history when it comes to doing reshoots, kind of panicking at the last minute and trying to make a movie that's already been written, shot, and for the most part edited into something else because they think it might change something. We've seen it with Suicide Squad. We've seen it with Justice League. And what a lot of people have said, I have not seen Suicide Squad, by the way, so I can only go by what I've been told. I have seen Justice League, and I know that it was a different director that kind of took over, and I know the circumstances for that film, some reshoots were not just because the studio didn't like what they were seeing, but there was issues with the original director, and I believe there was a death in his family. But the point is, though, because I was familiar with both directors' styles, I could very easily tell when it was Zack Snyder. That's right. I could very easily tell when this was a Zack Snyder directed scene versus a Joss Whedon directed scene. And from friends of mine who are big DC fans, and they saw Suicide Squad, they told me that you can see that this film was the way it was because it was re-edited. Like, a lot of things that were meant to look like flashbacks were actually originally scenes that they had just shot to be in sequential order, and then they took parts and they kind of Frankensteined it together. So it was very obvious that it was not a cohesive whole, and that's kind of the problem you run into when you do reshoots this late in the game and essentially try to change the film. And I know a lot of films do reshoots. I know a lot of films have pickups. So I'm not saying that's, issue. That's kind of standard. You get the editing room and you realize, okay, we need a pickup shot here. This scene isn't really jiving with the one that came before, so we need to reshoot it and kind of change the tone of it a little bit. That's pretty standard. That happens a lot, and not just big films either, small ones too. But when you're essentially trying to change your movie in post, that's when you run into issues, because the way the movie is put together, structured, the script, it is meant to be a certain movie. So when you try to kind of retroactively change that, it feels very forced because it's not natural. And that's kind of the concern that myself and I know a lot of other fans are kind of having now. Is like, if they do reshoots, are they doing reshoots because they saw the final cut of the film, the director, everybody was like, okay, we need to make some changes here to make this work, to make this flow better so we can make a more cohesive story and a more, compelling narrative. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being professional and taking your craft seriously enough where you want to make sure you deliver, the greatest piece of art you possibly can. But if it's a situation where the studio is looking at the numbers for Godzilla King of the Monsters and freaking out and thinking that we need to make a different kind of movie, and it's like, well, no. The issue was not the film itself. It was just when it was released and the fact that it's not a superhero movie. It's not Star Wars. It's something that is beloved by all the world over, but that number of people is much smaller than the former. And that if you go and try to change Godzilla versus Kong this late in the game, all you're going to do is essentially turn what you have into kind of this kind of hack job film where it's very clearly you're trying to make it something else. And either way, it's not going to work. At this point, if Godzilla as a franchise is not going to be mainstream in the West in terms of, money at the box office, you have to accept the fact that it doesn't matter what film you put out and how you edit it or re-edit it or cut it together and recut it together and reshoot it. It's not, because people haven't seen the movie before they go see the movie. The issue was not that everyone went and saw Godzilla King of the Monsters and walked out of that theater saying they hated it. The issue was not enough people went into the theater. So it doesn't really matter what movie was on screen. Is that it doesn't. You're not showing them the whole movie beforehand. You make a movie, you make a trailer, and essentially as a trailer, you can cut the trailer any way you want and make a movie look like anything you want it to, like regardless of what it is. So if you think one version's better, well, you don't even need to recut the film. Just make a bunch of trailers that make the movie look like it's one thing, get everyone in the theater, and then show them the movie you actually made. I mean, Hollywood is no stranger to doing just that. So that's kind of the word from the Warner Brothers front. Now, Legendary put out a statement that was different. Now, they discussed it as if they weren't really too worried, and they kind of said, yeah, there are some people who are kind of upset or bummed that domestically the film didn't do as well, because it's done well in China, surprise, but they were hoping for domestic numbers. Now China is owned by it's basically owned by a Chinese company, the Wanda Group. So for them, they're not maybe as concerned with domestic box office results. When I say domestic, I'm referring to the United States, because they themselves are not corporately based out of the United States. So they're kind of looking at the worldwide box office as a whole. And while the film, as a whole, hasn't done as well, their stake in things is a little less homegrown. Now, the film still has a ways to go. It still needs to make, at the very least, I think, a little over $400 million worldwide to break even. If it cracked the 500 mark, would it have made less than the other two, Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island? Yes, but technically the film would have turned a profit for the studios, albeit a small one, but a profit nonetheless. So the film still may not do financially well as everyone would want, but just the fact that you're seeing kind of these two almost polarizing viewpoints. Now, a big part of this, I'm sure, from Legendary perspective, is that it is a bit of a PR move at the same time. They don't want to come out and be like, we don't have faith in our product, because when people see a lot of kind of gloom and doom, they're just like, well, why do I want to get emotionally invested in a film franchise if the people making it don't even seem to give a damn about it? So whatever, I'll move on to something else. There's no shortage of other things coming out for people to get excited about. So yes, on one part they're going to be like, yeah, we're not going to boo our own team. But at the same time, it was a very kind of polarizing thing, because one of the things I took away from when I saw Warner Brothers' statement was, again, the whole, we want to be able to have Godzilla vs. Kong deliver the way that Godzilla King of the Monsters was unable to. And I heard that, and I was like, that's kind of a dig at Michael Dougherty a little bit, because he wrote the script with his writing partner, he directed the film, and you guys approved it every step of the way, and then suddenly the film doesn't make the kind of money you want, and now it feels like you're throwing him under the bus. Oh, well, we wanted to make it an A+ movie. Well, you thought this was going to be an A+ movie based on what you were seeing. So now the fact that it wasn't, financially speaking, has you rethinking and Godzilla vs. Kong. But that tells, at the same time, well, you wouldn't know one way or the other. You're not filmmakers. You produce these films, but all you can do is put your trust in the filmmaker and hope for the best. And again, there's a lot of films that have come out that were, that are massive successes, and there's no way to predict it. You look at some of the things that are successful versus not, and there's no way to predict it. Like Godzilla vs. Kong could come out, and this movie could blow everything out of the water. This could be an $800 million movie at the box office for the sheer fact that Kong's name is in the title. Or it could bomb. We don't know. The point is, you can spend hours and hours in the editing booth, you can recut the film over and over and over again, and you can keep pushing back release dates, and then you finally release the film, and it flops. Or you say, screw it, let's just take the loss, put the film out, and be over and done with, and it becomes, the biggest hit ever. There's no way to know. There's no way to know. This film is not an exact science. It's art, and art is subjective. And at the end of the day, there's no way to predict what's really going to be super successful. I mean, some things, yeah, you make a Star Wars movie, it's going to be successful. You make a Marvel movie, it's going to be successful. But beyond those two, franchises, you just gotta accept the fact that show business is gambling. You're gambling every time you make a film, and the more money you put behind a film, the bigger of a gamble it is. Again, Godzilla on paper sounds like this could be a massive, successful worldwide franchise, or it could really just appeal to the people it's always has appealed to, that niche market. And it doesn't matter if it's got $170 million special effects or a guy in a suit. At the end of the day, the people who like Godzilla are going to be the ones who turn out for it, and maybe only turn out for it. It might not translate over to that wider audience that everyone wants, because let's not forget that while Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island did well at the box office, did pretty good, they turned a profit. These films are a few years old now in an industry that is changing every year now. Year by year, it's changing. When Godzilla 2014 came out, the industry was different than it is today. Again, we already talked about streaming media and how that's become. When Godzilla 2014 came out, streaming media wasn't even as big of a deal. I mean, Netflix and stuff was around, sure, but it wasn't even as big or as popular or as widely used as it is in 2019. So even that has changed. But ultimately, these films did good. They did pretty good, but they weren't massive blockbuster successes that people are going to be talking about for years to come. So already, they were not performing in a way that might suggest that it was impossible to think that as interest in going to the movie theater was starting to wane a little bit, that films that were basically just barely cracking the 500 million mark might start to suffer, whereas, films that normally make $1 billion or more take a hit. Again, for instance, I think the Han Solo movie was the lowest grossing Star Wars film for Disney, and I still think that movie grossed at least $800 million. So the joke has always been like, people wish their films could succeed as bad as Disney films fail, because even when Disney movies fail, they still make more money than any other kind of film that is a success at the box office does. Again, $800 million, that's a failure for Disney, but Disney is in the $1 billion club. We make movies that make billions of dollars. So if our movie doesn't make $1 billion, we've done something wrong. Like, I know Avengers, Age of Ultron, but Disney considered that a flop. I think I even heard someone say, but commercially speaking, the film was not a flop. It made a lot of money. But for Disney, Marvel, Avengers, it wasn't as much as they wanted. Whereas most people would love to have their movie make what that movie made. If Godzilla King of the Monsters had made what Age of Ultron made, we wouldn't be having this discussion, and the MonsterVerse would be secure. But that's kind of where we're at. So we're seeing two kind of different viewpoints. Again, I know one of them is probably partially inspired by a little bit of kind of a PR campaign, because they don't want people to get discouraged and just give up on it either. But at the same time, Legendary has had just different distribution deals. For a little while they were with Universal. So the benefit of being a company like Legendary, where they're not a massive distributor like your Warner Brothers, like your Universals, like your Disneys, is that essentially they can get in bed with different companies to help produce their products. So essentially, Toho made a deal with Legendary to produce Godzilla films in the West, and the deal they had then with Warner Brothers was honestly less great, because the deal they had with Warner Brothers kind of was that Warner Brothers was going to be able to kind of secure a lot of their marketing and licensing of products of Godzilla in the West. Now Toho would not be able to kind of really directly sell and promote and license Godzilla beyond that. So there's a reason why you don't see a lot of Toho produced Godzilla products here. You can buy them, but you kind of have to buy them from overseas. Most of the marketing of toys and and licensed products in the West is kind of run by Warner Brothers, and that the last year of that deal is in 2020. Now it seems like Toho has already kind of started to experiment with that a little bit, because we've seen pop-up stores for the Godzilla stores appear in a couple places in the U.S. I think mostly just the West Coast. There was one in L.A., Seattle, and what have you. And they've already stated that on top of their own cinematic universe, they want to start basically licensing and promoting Godzilla abroad. They want stuff for amusement parks with him. They want their products, Godzilla products, to be licensed and sold here. So they're not giving up on the West. So, once 2020 is over, it's not like that's it. Toho's packing up shop and Godzilla is just going to be in Japan and Japan only. No, they have big plans to basically distribute and promote Godzilla all over the world, and they want to be at the forefront of that. So there is a chance that Legendary and Toho, they're still going to be in bed together. And Toho has stated that from starting in 2021, they're going to now be doing a minimum of 20% of the production cost of any Godzilla film and or any of their characters that are produced in the West with any kind of Western production company. So that sounds to me like they still have plans. They're still planning on working in the West and distributing Godzilla one way or the other. And because the issue seems to be less with Legendary and maybe more with Warner Brothers, we might see after Godzilla vs. Kong, Warner Brothers / Toho look to make a new deal, and maybe not renew their deal with Warner Brothers, but possibly sign a new deal with another bigger production company. So this could be Universal, which Legendary has worked with. It could even be, and again, this is all speculation. This is all hearsay. This is not me saying this with any kind of confirmation. This is all discussion for the sake of argument. So if you guys say, "Oh, you're reading in too much," I'm just using these as examples. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's just, for the sake of argument, say this happens. Let's say Legendary / Toho sign a deal with Disney. I mean, Disney's literally buying everything else. Whether it's a massive lucrative, they're starting off with big companies. They did Marvel, they just bought Fox. But as they buy out the bigger competitors, they're going to go down the chain and start buying up smaller production companies as well. Now, Legendary is not as big of a production company as Fox. But Legendary, potentially has some IPs. And one thing Disney's very good at is taking licenses and doing big things with them. Also, from the critic side of things, unofficially, a lot of critics don't like saying bad things about Disney, because Disney can grant you a lot of access when they have events, promotional screenings, this and that. A lot of members of the press are invited, and you get a lot of exclusive access, early access to what they're coming out with, what they're doing. And if you're part of the entertainment press, that's kind of the that's kind of like getting a spot at a White House press conference. That's the big time right there. So unfortunately, some opinions towards Disney may not be as genuine. Again, every critic loved The Last Jedi. I remember prior to that film coming out, I was seeing reviews that they were comparing it to The Empire Strikes Back. I saw a few that said it was better than The Empire Strikes Back. And then the vast majority of people who saw the movie actually didn't even like the movie. And I'm one of the rare people who actually really enjoy The Last Jedi, but on the flip side, I'm also not a big Star Wars fan, so to me, I just took it as a space movie. But for those of you guys who are really invested in Star Wars, the whole mythology and the franchise as a whole, you know, I understand that it wasn't really what you guys were looking for, and certain creative decisions that were made based, you know, in that film didn't really jive well with the Star Wars fandom as a whole. Okay. But it was pretty cut and dry. Like, the critics loved it, and then the fans saw it, people saw it, and were like, so it was very polarizing. You know. But again, Disney has a lot of power, and Disney wields a lot of power. And when Disney puts out a movie, people go and see it. Even people who necessarily don't necessarily have an interest in these sort of things, because now Disney is synonymous with quality. Disney products are, you know, people know for better or for worse, if it's not something they're normally interested in, they're going to see something that is made very well. So they'll go check it out for that reason alone. So Legendary and Toho kind of making a deal with someone, a massive corporate entity like Disney, would not be a bad thing for the MonsterVerse specifically, and just Godzilla in general. Now, if this happens, for all we know, again, and this is a hypothetical situation, so just understand that I'm speaking and say, let's say this happened, and I'm speaking that way just to kind of give you an example of how this business could go and this and that, but I'm not saying that this specifically is going to happen, but this is just a good way for me to kind of make my points through a hypothetical example. So let's say that happens. You know, Toho and Legendary are still, you know, working together to bring Godzilla stateside and make him a thing here. Okay, or in the West, I should say. I don't want to exclude Europe or anything just because I live in America. But okay, well, Toho, you know, felt that they kind of had their hands tied behind their back a little bit with the deal they signed with Warner Brothers, and you know, there's other players in town, and they seem that Disney is a major player. Disney holds clout all over the world. Disney is popular even in Japan. You know, the Avengers films, Marvel properties, they do very well over there. So Toho in the East is a very, you know, is a proven in terms of distribution and production. People know the name Toho. Disney is a global franchise. It is a global brand. So anything that gets under the banner of Disney is bound to get a degree of success that it probably would not have gotten otherwise. So let's say for us Godzilla fans who like the MonsterVerse, who love this amazing mythology that was kind of started in 2014 with Gareth Edwards' film, and then really expanded upon by Michael Dougherty and Godzilla King of the Monsters, and is probably going to continue so in Godzilla vs. Kong. We want to see that going. Maybe we want to see more of that world. We want to see that explored in different ways, both maybe in film and streaming media. Well, Disney can go a very long way into making that happen. And right off the bat, there'll be now more interest in Godzilla with the general audience in the West because it's under the banner of Disney. And they know Disney. They may not know much about Godzilla, but they know a lot about Disney. They are familiar with Disney. They know Disney products, whether it's their live-action remakes, Marvel, their animated stuff. They know Disney. They know Disney. So if Disney's slapping their name on something, okay, I guess it's worth checking out at least, you know. It might be the difference between going to the theater or not. Because, again, it's Disney. And, again, we know Disney. We like Disney, right? So if Disney says they like Godzilla, well, then maybe we like Godzilla too. And if Disney says they like Godzilla, I guarantee there's a lot of critics who are going to say they like Godzilla too. So, you know, if you want to talk and joke or make the argument that, you know, Disney is becoming too much of a monopoly, that they own everything, it's like, that's fine. And I'm not saying you're even wrong, but the reality is this is the state of things, this is the nature of things. And if Disney is the big empire that is going to be controlling everything, well, the good thing about that, if nothing else, is that things that are controlled by Disney survive because they are in bed with Disney. And again, this does not include anything Toho wants to produce on their own. You know, if you guys are purists, then you don't like anything that's not Toho exclusive, well, Toho's already said they're going to make their own Godzilla film. So you'll still get your own Toho only produced Godzilla films And I think they're smart in doing that because A, for me, it's just more Godzilla, and I'll always take more Godzilla. And they also know that, you know, their films will do very well in Japan. And that in terms of fans abroad, they will appease those fans, the fanboys who are like, if it's not made by Toho, then it's not the real Godzilla. Okay, fine, well here's a Godzilla that's made just by us. We're not teaming up with anybody else. Here's a series of films just by us. So those people are appeased, they're satisfied, they're satiated, and they're not, you know, they're lowering their pitchforks, they're dousing the flames on their torches, they're fine. And for everybody else who's normal and well-adjusted, we're just like, great, there's Godzilla over here, there's Godzilla over here, there's Godzilla here, there's Godzilla everywhere, and we're fine with that, because if it's one thing we love is Godzilla. So it's a situation where it's Godzilla in the West is probably not going to end. And I say that, even though the numbers are, because we live in a time, especially in Hollywood, where once Hollywood has something, they don't just let it go away. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we see all these remakes and reboots and sequels is Hollywood doesn't let anything go. We live in that age now where, again, I mean, Spider-Man has been rebooted how many times now? They had an animated movie. It's like they don't stop because it's Spider-Man. So even if the Spider-Man movie isn't making as much money as they wanted it to, it's Spider-Man. Spider-Man has to work. So like, there's always going to be that boardroom meeting where like, okay, we know Spider-Man can make money because everybody and their grandmother knows Spider-Man. But these movies aren't making us as much money as we wanted to. So what do we do with Spider-Man to make money? And they try it again. I guarantee you, as discussions already had about Godzilla, it's like, okay, the MonsterVerse, it's not making as much money as we would have hoped. But it's Godzilla. Everybody knows Godzilla. Everyone's heard that name. Everyone has a vague image in their mind of this large reptilian dinosaurian thing knocking over buildings. Godzilla is not an alien concept in terms of just a basic visual to anyone. And Toho knows that as well. Toho knows that if there's any one of their characters or kind of licensed products that could go abroad and do big numbers in terms of, you know, financial return, it's Godzilla. So if it's not happening now, everyone's going to be asked, okay, it's not going to be saying, should we or should we keep making Godzilla films? No, the question is going to be, okay, how do we make Godzilla films make a lot of money? That's the question. Hollywood doesn't drop anything. It's why they still keep making Predator movies. It's why they still keep making Alien movies. You know, it's why they're still making Star Wars movies. It's why they're still making Batman. It's why they don't let anything go. And I know what some of you guys are going to say. It's like, well, difference is those are Western-owned products, and Godzilla was started in other. That's true. But again, Toho wants to expand their brand. They want to become a player in the West. They don't want to just license their stuff out and that's that. No, they want to be a player in the West, in Hollywood specifically, and they've already stated that, you know, they want to do that with Godzilla. They want to turn Godzilla into like the poster child for their company, which kind of already is, because in terms of like, you know, Western marketability, Godzilla is the one thing that they've made where everybody knows what that is. They produced a lot of other films, did tons of other great franchises, series, you know, what have you. And a lot of people outside of the West or outside Japan never heard of it. But people know Godzilla. Okay, so what can we do? We have Godzilla, and I guarantee you Legendary's had this conversation. We have Godzilla. One of the most recognizable monsters of all time in film. There's got to be a way to make this work. There's got to be a way to make this a hit somehow. So whether it be kind of what we talked about in the last episode, where you know, streaming media, incorporating new technologies like VR, you know, finding a way to maybe, you know, reach audiences that way. But I guarantee you, there's been a conversation saying that we know there's a way to make Godzilla work. We just need to figure out how, and possibly with who. Now, so this is a weird thing, because the question is not will Godzilla continue. Godzilla is going to continue. The franchise that is Godzilla as a whole, that encompasses everything Godzilla, is not going to stop anytime soon and is doing just fine and is only going to rev up. So it's a weird conversation where we're not talking about will this franchise end. We're talking about which iterations might end. So, okay, so Toho's making more Godzilla films. There are going to be more Godzilla films coming. So we can all rest easy with that. The MonsterVerse, okay. It becomes a question of macro versus micro. So the micro question is, will the MonsterVerse continue? Will this specific storyline of Godzilla continue? The larger question then becomes, okay, let's say, will Hollywood and Legendary and Toho still make Godzilla movies in the West? Now, that could also mean they reboot Godzilla in the West. So the MonsterVerse could end. That iteration of Godzilla could end, but more films produced in the West could be made with Godzilla. So it would be kind of like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man versus the Amazing Spider-Man movies they did with Andrew Garfield. Same character, but it's a different continuity. Or you could even talk about that continuity versus the Andrew Garfield one. Same character, but different continuity. And it wouldn't be the first time Godzilla's done it. Godzilla's had multiple continuities, so he's the same character, just inhabiting different timelines, different continuities, different storylines. So that's the other question too, is do they just scrap the MonsterVerse and do a soft reboot of the character in the West, present the character in a new way? That's really the question, because again, for people who have been watching the MonsterVerse films, a lot of us really enjoy them. And a lot of the hardcore fans really like Godzilla King of the Monsters, me, myself included. Ashley feels the same way. We love the mythology that was set up, and we would love to see more in this universe. So then the question is, okay, then how do we present this universe, this continuity, in such a way that will draw in larger audiences? Again, that is the question if the MonsterVerse is to continue. Or they might just say, okay, MonsterVerse is over after Godzilla vs. Kong, but Legendary still is going to be making Godzilla movies. They're just going to reboot Godzilla in the West, and 2020 whatever, they're going to launch a new Godzilla series in the West with a new Godzilla, a new timeline, a new continuity, a new everything. And the MonsterVerse would have just been essentially 4 films. You know, Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and Godzilla vs. Kong, and that'll be it. So that's the question. The question is not, will Godzilla continue? The question is, how will Godzilla continue beyond Japanese shores? Because Toho has made it very clear they want it to. So, you know, for all the purists out there who say, no, it's not good. No, Toho is a business first and foremost. They love Godzilla, but like I've always said, but they love Godzilla more when he's making the money, and when he stops making the money, they put him in retirement. They've done it before, and they'll do it again if need be. But they have plans for Godzilla. They're putting a lot of money behind him. They are trying to turn Godzilla into their global financial brand. And you don't do that by just, putting the kibosh on everything. So, yep, they're going to do what they've always done, make their own series of films, just kind of keep that, that more traditional side of how they've made money off Godzilla going, which is fine by me, because I will always love watching Toho produce Godzilla films, and I will never stop. But now that they're going to be also producing Godzilla films outside of Japan, the question is, what form will that take? Will the MonsterVerse continue? Will Godzilla in the West be rebooted? Will Legendary continue to produce these films with Warner Brothers, or will they essentially look to, cozy up with a different studio, which may or may not be the worst idea in the world, because if Warner Brothers is thinking that the best way to salvage these movies is just try to just recut them and reshape everything late in the game, then I don't personally, as a fan, think that's the wise choice. I'm a fan of the filmmaker first and foremost. I want to see that filmmaker's vision of that film. Otherwise, it kind of makes it superfluous that they're even there, because if they're just going to, say action, and then after the fact the movie's going to be edited by a bunch of studio executives, to me that defeats the purpose. So, better or for worse, I want to see the Adam Wingard cut of Godzilla vs. Kong. I don't want to see a bunch of executives say, change this, change that, because at the end of the day, they're not filmmakers. Their job is to sign contracts and cut checks. That's what they're good at. Directors, they're good at making movies. That's their jobs. So I would rather have Legendary and Toho partner with a larger corporate entity that will allow the creative people involved with these films to do what it is they do, to do their job, and accept the fact that, hey, there's always going to be a financial risk when you make movies. And when you make, $100 million plus movies, yeah, the risk is bigger because you're dealing with a lot of money. But again, that's the name of the game. This is show business. It would be great if we could always engineer a hit. It would be great if we could always predict what's going to be, a massive financial success. So you can lean in on that and see what's going to be a complete flop so you can avoid that. But there's no way to predict that. All you can really do at the end of the day is make the best possible film you think you can, put it out there, promote it, do what you got to do. But ultimately, it comes down to just this. You're just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. And sometimes it works out and everyone's happy and everyone's patting themselves on the back, and then sometimes it doesn't and you're left there scratching your head going, what happened? What could we have done more? Was there anything we could have done more, or was it just the way that it was? Again, I think if anything really hurt Godzilla King of the Monsters, it was just a release date. I think it was just wedged in between too much. And I think while I would love as a fan to be able to say, yeah, you can stick Godzilla anywhere and Godzilla will be a contender, he'll compete no matter what. The reality is, you put your ego aside and you're like, I want what's best for these movies. I want these movies to make as much money as they can. And if that means sticking them somewhere where there's nobody else, pushing them around and basically turning them into the big fish in the small pond, I really don't care. If that's the difference between a few $100 million at the box office, let him be the big fish in the small pond. Money's money, and money's what gets more of these films made. So if sticking Godzilla in February or March means it's going to make $500, $600, $700 million at the box office, as opposed to putting it in May and having it made, hopefully get to 500, hopefully, stick it earlier in the year. Do it, because it has a better chance, and that's ultimately what I want. I want more Godzilla. So I want the studios to do what's best for the franchise as a whole. No ego, okay? In a perfect world, you could put Godzilla against Avengers and Godzilla would beat Avengers every time. That's a perfect world. That's the world I want my children to grow up in. That's not the world they're growing up in, though. You put Godzilla against something like Avengers, the Avengers will stomp Godzilla so deep into the ground that he'll fall out the bottom of the planet and float away into space. Brings me no joy whatsoever to vomit up those words, but it's the truth. So what can we do to help this franchise? And I think a lot of it comes down to real estate. When you release these movies, maybe in time they'll build up enough of a fan base, with the general audience, and where they'll be able to start competing with other things more, and then you can start putting them in May, maybe in June, where they're more of a contender. But right now, the only people who really have Godzilla's back are the people who've always have Godzilla's back, and that's the fans. Even the fanboys who hate this movie, who shit on it, just because it's not Toho specifically making the movie, even though, again, I always say Toho approves everything. They have to get Toho's permission to do anything and everything in these movies, so basically Toho is saying, yep, if we were making it, this is how we were doing it. But even those guys, they still go and see the movie. Then they go home and jump on YouTube and shit all over it, but they still went and saw the movie. Legendary, Warner Brothers, Toho, they all know that they got those people's tickets. They've got their money. Opening night, the fans, the fanboys, the purists, the zealots, everyone is going to be in those theaters watching that movie. And they know that. So it's not any of all of our money they're worried about. It's the general audience. How do we get the general audience to join us all in that theater on the opening night and opening weekend? That's the question. I guarantee that's the question they have. And I don't think in this day and age of reboots, remakes, sequels, try again, that they're going to just drop Godzilla, because that's not the kind of the culture we live in terms of the entertainment industry. So, it's one of those things where those of us who are, not fans of certain franchises, again, every time they reboot Spider-Man, I'm like, again, they're doing another Spider-Man again. But for you guys who love Spider-Man, you're probably thrilled, because when one franchise isn't working and it looks like they're going to stop it, that, okay, well, we're still going to get more Spider-Man. We don't have to be like, that's the end of the thing we love. No, they're going to keep going. So for us now, Godzilla fans, we're hoping for the same thing. We're hoping that he gets the same treatment where, okay, if the Monsterverse isn't making the kind of money they want, okay, they might end the Monsterverse, which is a bummer, but they're not ending Godzilla, In addition to Toho making Godzilla movies, Legendary is still going to make the Godzilla movies. They're going to might reboot it. They might start it up again with somebody else, but they're still going to make it. Or they might sign a deal with somebody else, them and Toho, and keep the MonsterVerse going and try it again. And maybe with a different, financial partner, the MonsterVerse might be able to become something that is, on par with the kind of numbers that, Warner Brothers was hoping to get. Because again, it sounds like Legendary is still in Godzilla's corner and they're not willing to rule him out just yet, where Warner Brothers, it kind of feels like maybe they're a little bit more nervous about this franchise and they're trying to do whatever they can to squeeze every last dollar to try to fix it at the end of the day. But again, Warner Brothers is a US-based company, so they're more focused on the domestic numbers, whereas Legendary is a bit more of a worldwide company, so they're kind of looking at maybe at a more broad perspective. And I think the right way of looking at it is kind of in the middle, personally. I don't think you want to be too removed from one, because then you're kind of in the air and looking around where everything might look really good from way up high. But if you're also just have your nose just buried in the ground in one spot, you're also kind of losing a sense of perspective. So I think both sides need to kind of come in the middle a little bit and kind of get a more realistic view. But ultimately, Warner Brothers has DC. They have their properties that they themselves own, like Warner Brothers, exclusive properties, as opposed to Godzilla, which is more kind of an adopted child for them. Godzilla is, the kid that came along with the marriage to Legendary, so Godzilla is their stepchild, and Aquaman, Batman, Superman are their biological children. So if they have to lose one or the other, I think, hey, they might get a divorce with Legendary and there goes the stepkid, but they still have their kids. And Legendary might say, okay, maybe we need to get remarried again, but with, a partner who will love our children as their own. Which means more Godzilla, and hopefully the MonsterVerse will continue. But that's it. So this is all me just kind of spitballing, just kind of talking about the industry a little bit. And again, none of this is confirmed. This is all just speculation. This is me just kind of having a conversation. So do not take anything that I've said as gospel. A piece of news could come out in a day or so that takes everything I just said and just renders it null and void. Again, this is not about me saying, hey, did you hear what's going on? This is me just having a conversation. This is kind of like if, we both read the news, we follow the entertainment industry, we follow Godzilla, and we're just sitting here across from each other having a conversation, speculating, discussing, talking about possibilities, what could come of if this happens, what could come of if that happens. But this is not me saying with any kind of certainty anything. It's all speculation. And so I just want to make that very clear, because again, I can see someone maybe skipping through parts of this video, getting just a few highlights, and then coming back and saying, oh, well, technically, no, it's not going to happen. I'm not saying any of this is going to happen. It's just speculation. We could find out that, yep, Warner Brothers and Legendary have every intention of making more MonsterVerse movies, or they're going to reboot Godzilla altogether, or maybe I'm completely wrong and that's it. Godzilla really is done being produced in the West, and Toho's going to rescind their plans to produce any more films in the West, and they're just going to keep it local in Japan, and that might be it. And that's a possibility. All these things are just possibilities, but it's fun to discuss. It's fun to speculate, and until we get any kind of concrete, definitive news, that's really all we can do. But again, that's all I wanted to do. So yeah, Legendary, Warner Brothers, two different camps that maybe might not be as close as we thought, or it could just be the way the press is inferring it. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Warner Brothers seems like, hopefully, while Legendary seems to be fine with the way things are going, in terms of how these films are made, Warner Brothers is showing some concerns, but hopefully that means on both ends they are feeling the way they do because they care about the franchise, and Legendary likes the way they're being made, and Warner Brothers might want to make some changes because they're concerned with the future of it and they only want what's best for it. So they feel that they're doing what's best for Godzilla. So hopefully that's what it is, and if that is the case, then Legendary and Warner Brothers can maybe come to some kind of agreement, understanding, and say, hey, let's figure out what we can both agree upon that makes us both happy, but that's also best for this franchise. And therefore that'll make the fans happy. Because ultimately, if they make these movies for people to enjoy, and if no one's enjoying them, then that's the real issue. But a lot of people are enjoying them, just not as many people are going to see them. That's that's what they got to figure out. And I have no doubt in my mind that they've already had numerous meetings and discussions about what can be done to hopefully fix that, rectify that, whatever. So from here, all we can do is wait and see what comes down the pipeline in terms of news and information. But something tells me that even if Kong or Godzilla vs. Kong gets pushed back, it's only going to get pushed back a little later in the year. So we're still not going to have to wait like 4 or 5 years for another movie. So more news is coming in. 2020 is the year that deal expires with Toho. So we're going to be getting more news about Godzilla's future as a whole much sooner than later, which means we will have much more to talk about much sooner than later. But anyway, that is going to do it for this episode of the Kaiju Cataclysm. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know if I've said this before, but I just want to put it out there that if the Godzilla franchise, the fandom, it's a long-running thing, and like with all fandoms, you're going to see people who come across as elitist or standoffish. Some people are going to say, this is Godzilla, this is not Godzilla, you're not a real Godzilla fan, if, ... that kind of thing. I want to put it out there that this channel is a safe space. I know it might sound kind of weird and hokey, but just roll with me for a second. If you're a long-time Godzilla fan, if you're new to the franchise, if you discovered Godzilla through Godzilla King of the Monsters, and this is your introduction to this character, to this franchise, know that I don't see you as any less of a Godzilla fan as someone who's liked Godzilla since they were 3 years old, someone who grew up on the Showa era, the Heisei era, or even Millennium films. If you like Godzilla King of the Monsters, and you love it, and you love what's in it, and it makes you want to go watch the other Godzilla films, then that makes you no less of a Godzilla fan than the person whose first experience with Godzilla was the original 1954 Gojira, or The Return of Godzilla, or Godzilla vs. Hedorah. What matters is Godzilla appeals to different people throughout the generations, and Godzilla keeps having movies made, and that is for a lot of people. It's a generational thing. It's how people discover Godzilla. I was born in the 80s, and surprise, surprise, it was The Return of Godzilla from 1984, even though I saw the American cut, which is called Godzilla 1985. That introduced me to the character. That was the Godzilla of my generation. That was the start of my generation's Godzilla for me. So that was my introduction to Godzilla. But from there, I went back and watched the older Showa films, and then as the later Heisei films were released, I checked them out as well. So just know that you can come to this channel and not worry about being judged or put down or made to feel like you're in any way less legitimate than someone else who, pats themselves on the back every day because my introduction to Godzilla was the Showa era, or, I only watch Godzilla films that, Tokusatsu effect. If you saw a movie called Godzilla, and I'm going to exclude Godzilla 98, which I've talked about in previous films or videos why I feel that way, so I'm not going to get back in it again, but barring that film, if you've seen something that's called Godzilla, has Godzilla in the name, and you liked it, and that's what kicked off your passion for it, you are a Godzilla fan. And do not let anybody else tell you otherwise. And if you thought Godzilla King of the Monsters was a great movie, then you know what? Good for you. Don't let someone tell you it's not a real Godzilla movie. It's a real Godzilla movie. And if that was your introduction to Godzilla, if you find yourself now saying you're a Godzilla fan, wearing the shirt, buying the merch, going to G-Fest, whatever, and your first experience was Godzilla King of the Monsters or maybe Godzilla 2014, don't let anyone make you feel like you are not legitimate. Because you are. Because you saw a Godzilla movie and you fell in love with Godzilla. That makes you a Godzilla fan. And Godzilla fans are welcome here. And Godzilla fans will not be judged regardless of how they became Godzilla fans. And you know what? Even though I shit on Godzilla 98, there are a lot of people who saw that movie first. That was their introduction to Godzilla, at least the name. And from there, they went and watched the Toho films and fell in love with those movies. But Godzilla, the name, the character, would not even been on their radar had it not been for this big, splashy Western film that came out in theaters. And a lot of them even said, yeah, I liked that movie when it came out. And then I went and watched the other movies and realized that, wow, that's not Godzilla. But it's still what got them into Godzilla. So even if that movie was your introduction to the franchise, you were a Godzilla fan. And This is a place where everyone can come together and just celebrate Godzilla. No judgments, no elitism, no elitist here. I can't never say that word right. This is a place where we can just celebrate this character and all his many, numerous, glorious incarnations, iterations, because it is because he has been presented in so many different ways and continues to be so, is a reason why 65 years later, he's still here. And we're not just talking about him in retrospect, we're talking about him, you know, as a current topic of the day. So, Godzilla fans, all of you, if you're checking out this channel, welcome home. Because that's what this place is for Godzilla fans, a home, a safe place. But anyway, that's my little, you know, Oscar speech on the soapbox. I'll step down off that now. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Greatly appreciate all your love and support. Ashley will probably be back on with me for the next one again. I want to start doing more Cataclysm episodes, but I figured they're kind of the more businessy ones, you know. She's less interested in those topics. She's more interested in, like, you know, the art form of the films themselves. When it's dealing more with specific films or whatnot, those will be kind of more the ones she'll join me on. And these kind of, I guess, more drier topics, which I try to make interesting, but I apologize if I'm failing at. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace!